This should not happen in a free country like Australia.
The fact that they are not certified according to the Meta's own policies that they need to adhere to.
Someone tried to coerce her into making a complaint against me, and she still refused.
Warning. This next segment contains some not safe for work language. Sorry, but I can't talk about this topic without swearing. What are they putting in the water in New Zealand? No, I'm not trying to revive old rivalries with our cousins across the ditch, but seriously, what is going on? First, Jacinda Ardern gave us this little gem straight out of the World Economic Forum Young Leaders Academy playbook.
Otherwise, dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth. We will provide.
Now the interim and hopefully soon to be former New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has come out and said this.
In terms of the vaccine mandates, I acknowledge that it was a challenging time for people, but they ultimately made their own choices. There was no compulsory vaccination. People made their own choices. In terms of
there was no compulsory vaccination. What the actual flock? Get it? Flock? Sheep? Oh, come on, I couldn't do a segment on New Zealand without at least one sheep joke. Give me a break. What's going on is that they have absolutely no shame. And they think that the people of New Zealand are so stupid that they would get away with that. It's up to the people of New Zealand, our beloved cousins across the ditch, to prove them wrong. And before the sycophants pile into the comments and say, oh, that technically the mandates weren't actually mandatory, although they were called mandates, and that no one was actually forced at gunpoint, let me remind you of a legal concept known as duress. To put someone under duress means that you're using threats, violence, constraints, or other action to coerce someone into doing something against their will or better judgment. And with that in mind, have a look at this clip from Jacinda Ardern a year ago.
Vaccinated today if you want to avoid level 3 in your community.
A plea from the Prime Minister, who called today stronger than ever.
If we had a vaccination rate at 90% or above in either Hamilton or Raglan, it is highly unlikely that we would be here today announcing level 3 restrictions.
That is duress. Threats and constraints to coerce people into doing something against their will or better judgment. What you just saw from the former Prime Minister of New Zealand is literally the very definition of duress. The thing about duress is that it's taken very seriously in our legal systems both here in Australia and in New Zealand. For example, a confession given under duress is not considered a confession at all. A contract signed under duress is null and void. Medical treatment consented to under duress was done without consent and is a clear, blatant violation of the Nuremberg Code, which is actually the second violation, the first being that there could not be free informed consent because people were not adequately informed. So people were not informed and their consent is null and void because it was extracted under duress. And that means the Nuremberg Code has been violated not once but twice. And that makes every politician who supported the mandates a human rights violator. It is an open and shut case, in my opinion. And I think they know that. That's why the gaslighting has started in earnest. We're seeing it from leaders and former leaders all over the world, but it tells a story. Notice how they're not saying, yeah, of course we forced you to take that vaccine. We saved your life. They're not doubling down. They're backpedaling. They're lying through their teeth and gaslighting. But they're not actually standing up for what they did. They know that that's an untenable position to try and hold, so they resort to word plays and cynical deceptions, hoping that it might work. Well, it's up to us to make sure that it doesn't. It's up to us to ensure that people understand what duress is and how it completely invalidates any supposed consent that people apparently gave. New Zealand, you'll soon have the chance to put an end to Chris Hipkins' political career. Don't fuck it up like we did with Daniel Andrews here in Victoria. Now, here's the news. Well, here at the Aussie Wire, we love to follow stories of people who are trying to make a difference. And there's many different ways to try and make a difference. Some people, like myself, do it through media and communications. Some people do it quietly, working away in charities or raising families or doing business. Some people take their fight into the legal realm. And for some people, the legal fight comes to them rather than the other way around. My next guest is one such person. A legal fight came his way. He fought it, and, well, I won't tell you what happened. I'll let him tell you for himself. Lyle Shelton from the Family First Party, thank you so much for coming on the Aussie Wire, and thank you to ADH TV for this amazing-looking studio you've got there.
Yeah, thanks, Topher. It's a privilege to be with you.
Now, for those that don't know, I've got a newspaper clipping here. Let's just bring that up. But for those that don't know, what happened? What led to you being sued and being on the hook for potentially $20,000?
Yeah, well, look, way back in January of 2020, there was a protest held at a Brisbane City Council library where two LGBTIQA plus drag queens were involved in one of these drag queen story times. And a group of very courageous young Liberal National Party students from the University of Queensland went into that scenario and was simply very peacefully but firmly saying drag queens were not for kids. I saw this blow up on social media. I recognised at least one of the participants and I thought, these guys are brave. And I thought, I really should have been there with them, supporting them, because these drag queens are peddling something, very dangerous for children. Well, the next day, the leader of that protest, Wilson Gavin, after a massive social media backlash. Wilson, of course, a gay man himself, was abused by the LGBTIQA plus community, and he tragically committed suicide. I was really moved by this. I wrote a blog where I essentially said that drag queens were dangerous role models for children. A few months later, I was sued.
Now, this idea that drag queens are dangerous role models for children, there is room for debate here. People can debate that if they want to. That's what a free country is all about. So from your perspective, when they came for you, did the thought ever cross your mind of just kind of paying them to go away, or was it always just the fight is on, I'm going to stand up for my right to say these things?
Yeah, look, for me, the fight was on because, I'd researched, I did some Googling, which, most children can do. They have devices these days. And I found that these two drag queen social media presence was quite horrendous. One of them, Johnny Valkyrie, a woman presenting to children as a man, had pictures on her Facebook page of young women with their breasts cut off and their raw scars, and was crowdfunding for her own double mastectomy, which she went through with tragically. The other drag queen, Dwayne Hill, was parading on his Facebook page an award from the pornography trade, an Adult Entertainment X award. He also had a picture of a fake penis with a diamond ring around it. His drag name is Diamond Goodrim. You can Google that or look at the transcripts of my trial to work out what that means in the wonderful world of rainbow
Let me just
flags.
suggest don't Google that name at work because that might be an HR violation, the results that you get there. Sorry, Lyle.
Good point. Yeah, no, good point, Topher. But this is the sort of thing, these are the sort of role models that were being placed in front of children. So for me, I didn't want to back down for this. And I remember clearly going to my first compulsory mediation in the Queensland Human Rights Commission. And a few days before, on the Sunday, we'd had a family event with my extended family. I've got younger brothers and sisters who have got young children, and we had all these beautiful little children, nephews and nieces around. And as I went to that mediation with these drag queens, all I could see in my mind's eye was the faces of my little nephews and nieces, and the idea that they could be indoctrinated into these crazy, sexualised, gender-fluid worlds that the LGBTIQA plus activists want these children to be indoctrinated into. So I was up for the fight, and there was no way in the world that I was going to back down because our children are too precious.
Well, that fight dragged on for years, as as these sorts of legal proceedings tend to do. But the decision has now been handed down, and without giving too much away, I've grabbed an article here from the Star Observer. You were successful in that court case. But after this many years and all of the cost and heartache and trouble, does it feel like a win, or is the punishment actually really in the process that you were forced through?
The punishment is definitely in the process. It was 3 years, probably around about $300,000. My supporters raised over $200,000, for which I'm incredibly grateful. The Human Rights Law Alliance, my incredible legal team, their donors kicked in a lot of money. There was a big pro bono component in that. So lots of generosity allowed me to get to where I got. But the process is the punishment. No Australian should have to go through 3 years hundreds of thousands of dollars, a 3-day trial, being cross-examined by a senior counsel for 3 hours on the stand, for the sake of saying that drag queens are dangerous role models for children. This should not happen in a free country like Australia. So yes, it's a great win, brilliant legal work. It should be a great encouragement to all of us who are fighting the fight out there and to those who are watching the fight and care about our country. But we've got to see these flawed anti-discrimination laws, these so-called vilification laws, which exist in every state and territory and also at federal level. These laws need to be changed. And I can't find any politicians willing to take up the fight to get law reform in this area so that we can restore free speech to this country. And that's a fight that desperately needs to be taken up, because while these laws are on the books, this is a chilling effect on freedom of speech and necessary debate in the protection of children.
People often ask, why would you go through that? It was only going to be a $20,000 payout. Instead, you've taken this massive risk, 3 years of your life, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yes, sure, money was raised, but that's money that, that could have gone elsewhere. What's the point? What's the purpose? Was this victory just about you and about getting what you wanted, or is there a bigger picture here?
No, it's definitely the bigger picture, Topher, and I think the people who chipped in small amounts of money that added up to a lot, they could see this too, that by going after me, these people are going after them. And the bigger picture is freedom of speech in this country and pushing back on the indoctrination of our children. This is harmful, insidious, wicked stuff that's being perpetrated upon our children to teach them that their gender is fluid, put them on a pathway to, chemical and physical castration and brain damage from puberty blockers, etc., to put sexualized role models in front of children. I mean, in the court case, the drag queens admitted that the whole point of a drag persona is to be sexualized. Now, anyone who thinks that anything to do with sex and sexualization should mix with little children, that is just wrong. And we have to be free to say that. That is the bigger picture in this, and that's why we fought it. And look, whilst these bad laws are still on the books, I think it's going to make these LGBTIQA+ activists and their taxpayer-funded lawyers, they got taxpayer-funded legal help. It's going to make these people think twice before taking on these vexatious cases again.
Well, Lyle, thank you for accepting that fight when it came and found you. You've now set a precedent that the things that you said are now able to be said and repeated again. We have a court precedent saying that is, in fact, an acceptable thing, and people don't need to be afraid of being sued by activists for saying the things that you've said. So thank you for setting that precedent. Thank you for your work. I look forward to talking to you in future. You're involved in a lot of great projects, a lot of great organisations, and you do really great work. So we look forward to having you on in future here on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you so much, Topher.
Well, here at the Aussie Wire, we've been following these so-called fact checkers. We brought you the revelations thanks to great work by Rukshan Fernando and a lawsuit from Avi Yemeni from Rebel News that the fact-checking contract was actually released. It became public and it was relatively uncomfortable. I'm not going to say it was damning. Of course, there was going to be a contractual relationship there between, for example, RMIT Fact Lab and Meta, who they're doing the fact-checking for. But once those details come out, it does raise a lot more questions than what it answers. But now there's even more questions going on, and I had to bring Rukshan Fernando back. This is, of course, an extension of the great work that he started, but things have gotten to be a bit of a mess with FactLab, with Meta, with what in the world is going on. So Rukshan Fernando, thank you for coming back on the Aussie Wire, hopefully to clear up some of this confusion out of my head. You've done some great work, and we're going to put a link to one of your videos into the description of this video. I highly recommend people go and watch it. You've given people a bit of a rundown on what's happening, but just the Cliff Notes version. What's going on? What's been the fallout now?
Great to be back, Topher. Well, the fallout is that the fact checker themselves has been suspended by Meta. And I'm laughing because, normally it's this company or this organization, RMIT Fact Lab, that goes around graying out people's posts on Facebook or, effectively censoring them. And embarrassingly for them, they have been disgraced by Facebook themselves, by Meta, by having their status, their access to this fact-checking tools of Facebook suspended. Because of some of the complaints that they've received about them, and also the fact that they are not certified according to the Meta's own policies that they need to adhere to. So since that's become more revealed, since I think Sky News ran a story on this, since some Australian senators started asking questions about this, Meta has had to take an action against this group. And I think it's a good step in the right direction in holding these type of institutions accountable, because they've just been running amok against Australians over the last few years with a lot of, in my opinion, erroneous fact checks. And to see that these organizations are now being held accountable. And now I know not everyone's going to be happy with the way they're being held accountable, maybe, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
Well, it's quite a sharp departure from the direction that we've been seeing us going in. This sort of censorship industrial complex, the speech protection racket that has appeared since COVID came along, thanks to Meta, thanks to governments working hand in hand with fact checkers. And like you say, they've been cancelled now, and it is quite hilarious for people like us who have had our accounts suspended in the past on their say-so. But to me, there appear to be three different issues here. There is the contractual relationship that was revealed as a result of the RV Yemeni lawsuit that you brought out and you found in your own research. And what was interesting about that was the incentives that it created. And I talked about that on the Aussie Wire a little while ago. It created incentives to simply produce a volume of content rather than a quality of content. And I think there's some serious quality assurance issues there. Then there's the issue of certification. And this was 100% your work, and I applaud you for this, uncovering the fact that they were operating, claiming to have a certification that actually the certifying body did not actually say that they had. That's what Sky News then picked up and amplified your story on that. And that appears to have done some damage. But there's a third point here that is coming out now, and that is that there is the appearance of a very strong level of bias, particularly around the Voice campaign. I would argue on many things before that, but I think it's particularly obvious on the Voice campaign. And it was kind of revealed as a result of this big argument about how many pages are in the Statement from the Heart. Can you break down for us a little bit what's likely to be the outcome of this suspension, and what do you really think was the reason for it? Because there's a couple of possible candidates.
Yes, look, I think this suspension is temporary. It's just Meta covering their backside because of the political pressure, particularly from the Australian Parliament. I think they're taking these steps to appear like they are transparent and accountable, like they've said so. But they're only doing that now because they've been caught with their pants down, right? Like that's what's happened in this scenario. In terms of the certification thing, I think it's important to note that many people have actually raised that issue about certification, because you can see it on the IFCN website. When you go there, you can see they have a list of the people who are expired. So it's very plain as day when you go to this certification place. And many people have been bringing that up. What happened with me in particular was I found it in the contractual obligations there as well, that the paperwork that they've signed with Meta. So I guess it's a different standard than just seeing it on this website. And then the fact that you have a big outlet like Sky News running this around this issue when it happened with the one-page statement, with the Uluru Statement from the Heart, because they fact-checked Peter Credlin. Then you had the politicians who are also on, I guess, the no side getting involved as well and asking some questions. So there's two parts to it. I think it's kind of sad that when ordinary people like myself or other users have brought this fact up, Meta never took any action on these things. And when it came to this kind of political pressure, which is okay in this instance, but I understand why it happened. But when it came to this political pressure, they were more willing to act. And I think it shows you that there has to be this union between the everyday person and also politicians when it comes to standing up to these type of organizations. And of course, the mainstream media, they have to be on side as well in terms of holding these people accountable. And for a long time, they have not been doing that. And I'm not even sure if Sky News would have, got involved in the manner that they had if they had not themselves been subject to an erroneous fact check that they felt. So with this one-page statement, the problem with that is, and the problem around fact-checking this thing is, the very people that RMIT Fact Lab used to, their experts, were the same people that had previously said that this Uluru Statement is more than just one page. Yeah. So their very fact checks include the people who have made those statements in the past. I mean, you see how that's a problem. And then you're delving into this area where it's more about activism as opposed to, expert style fact checking, which they claim to do. And this is why we have a lot of complaints around this process, because a lot of the fact checks done by RMIT Fact Lab, as it relates to the Voice to Parliament, seems to go in one direction. Yeah. And your guess is as good as mine, Topher. You probably know what direction that's in.
Look, Rukshan, it calls to mind a line out of George Orwell's 1984, which is, of course, an oft misquoted book, but I think in this case it is actually appropriate. He speaks of there being an ever-changing present. There is no past. There is just an ever-changing present in which the party is always right. And here we have these fact-checkers saying, no, don't listen to what I said last year. No, listen to what I'm saying now. The present is what's right. But there's another area where that's happening, and you've just said there you suspect that this suspension will probably be temporary. There's a part of me that agrees with you. They're likely just to go and re-get their certification and be able to tick that box in the contract. But there is one last layer to this that I want to touch on before we close this story, and that is the fact that the Fact Lab team have been removed from the RMIT Fact Lab website. ABC have been making changes to the staff that they list on their website as fact checkers. There does appear to be more to this than just a matter of, we'll sort out the paperwork. What do we know, or what do you think might be happening there?
Yeah, look, I think they're being challenged. They're a bit embarrassed. They're a bit panicky. I'm sure they're having little meetings in their rooms at RMIT about how to deal with this, the public fallout of it, because this hasn't really happened before. This has become an international story as well. And it's embarrassing because this is a university and they're now embroiled in this. ABC is embroiled on this. And there's a lot of questionable things that arise from this. That's why they're doing all these major changes to their website, changes to their team. Thank God they've put some transparency back into their website and actually listed now that they're paid by Meta as well, that they're getting money from Meta, because that never used to be there. So they've done that. Funnily enough, they've also disclosed, Topher, on their support page now on RMIT Fact Lab, that they are also getting grants from IFCN, which is the accreditors. So think about this. The same people accrediting RMIT Fact Lab are also giving them grants, which I'm guessing are monetary grants. And then, supposedly now they're going to, check their accreditation again and give it to them most likely. Well, why not? They're already giving them grants. This whole relationship revolves around something, with something which is very incestuous in nature, in the way it kind of all works out. And the worst part of all of this, when looking into this, IFCN, which is a part of this Poynter Institute, they have many links to other donors and international foreign funds and so on. One example, this was actually, very well funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So a lot of this kind of foreign money, a lot of these lobby groups, advocacy groups from overseas, there's many there on the list. You can actually go to the website and see who they are. That money is then now trickling down to organizations like RMIT Fact Lab. And these kind of relationships have never been disclosed, but they're being disclosed now. And I think that's because we are looking into them. And I think it's very important that we continue to do this because it just means that they're more accountable and more careful in the way that they, carry on as activists. I don't mind that there's fact checkers. One of the great things on X right now is community notes. And I'm not sure if you've seen much of the community notes in action, but that seems like a very fair system of fact checking that takes into account a whole bunch of views and kind of comes to this middle of the ground conclusion. Sometimes it might go your way, sometimes it might not, but it seems very fair and transparent how it all operates. With these activists at RMIT Fact Lab, they have a lot of left-leaning opinions from what I've seen on their Twitter profiles and so on, and they act on those similar type of opinions. And it's very transparent to me what they're doing. They are being transparent, but in the activist sense. So I think it's good now that we're seeing them, their feet held to the fire, and they're trying to be more responsible.
Well, look, I applaud your role in helping the story to blow up and adding to the story. It's now being picked up by mainstream media. Whether that would have even happened at all were it not for the alternative media like yourself, like RV Yemeni and Rebel News, keeping the pressure on for so long, well, we'll never know the answer to that. But I do thank you for your role in making it blow up. It is transparency that's the key. I'm of the opinion that everyone is biased, and the people who think they're not biased are the most dangerous of all because they're blind to their own biases. I'm biased. I'm pro-freedom. I'm pro-humanity. I'm pro-individualism. I want to see humans flourish. That's my bias, and that's where I come from and everything, and I try to be very transparent and upfront about that. It's these organisations that claim to be unbiased that I think are the ones that you really need to keep an eye on. A little bit of sunlight goes a long way. Rukshan, thank you for helping to shine that sunlight onto this story.
Thanks, mate. See you next time.
Well, some weeks ago, we brought you the story of the suspended Dr. William Bay, and those of you who watch regularly, you'll be aware of some of the, let's just say, strange things that AHPRA have been up to in terms of how they've been handling doctors and the suspension of doctors' licences, etc., in relation especially to medications around COVID. But this problem is not limited just to Dr. William Bay. In fact, it's affecting a lot of good doctors out there. There's a lot of good doctors out there that aren't able to see patients at the moment because their registration has been suspended by AHPRA. Some under slightly more suspicious circumstances than others. My next guest is the suspended Dr. My Le Trinh. My Le, welcome to the Aussie Wire. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Now, can you just give us a quick précis of what is your situation at the moment? Who are you? What was your area of medicine where you were practicing? And tell us the story of the suspension as it's unfolded up to this point.
Sure. So I've been a GP for close to 30 years, 27 years, and I've been practicing in the northwest of Sydney, New South Wales. And I was suspended on the 27th of October 2021 as a result of two complaints that came to me on the same day. Now, I've never had any complaints in the whole of my career until September of 2021. So I received two complaints on the same day. One was from Westmead Toxicology Department regarding a patient that I've treated. This lady was gravely ill with COVID-19. She was in cytokine storm and she was diagnosed in hospital, but she refused to go back to the hospital because she had a fear that she's going to die and she didn't want to die without her loved ones around her. So she, as a consequence, I decided to treat her. She got better. She did get some side effects, maybe as a result of my treatment or from something else. I don't know because I don't know the circumstances around her presentation. However, she ended up in casualty, and as a result, they reported me to the Westmead Toxicology Department, referred me to the Medical Council, the HCCC. My second complaint was from someone called John Smith, who claimed to be a member of the public and who presented with an ivermectin script, which turned out to be that of my family member. And so we don't know anyone called John Smith. I've asked the Medical Council and the HCCC as to who John Smith is, and they refused to tell me who this person is. Now, this person, John Smith, does not have an address, does not have a telephone number that's connected, and his email address bounced back. So there's no way that any of these health regulators are able to contact John Smith. So how can they investigate a complaint that had that they don't know who the complainant was?
And you're suspended on the basis of those two complaints. There is so much to unpack there. I'm going to have to just pick my way through this piece by piece because I want to go right back to that very first complaint. Here is a lady who is in grave health, in fear of her own life. She makes a medical choice about, in a sense, how she would rather die. She would rather die amongst loved ones than in hospital. She comes to you for treatment. You, as a doctor, do your best, and it appears that there may have been some side effects as a result of your treatment. Is that a fair summary?
Correct.
Did the patient want to complain about your services to her as a doctor, or is it just the toxicology department?
Just the toxicology department. In fact, the patient doesn't want to. Not only that, someone tried to coerce her into making a complaint against me, and she still refused to.
So the patient themselves is happy with the service that you provided. They are alive. Let's not lose sight of where they were at when they came to you. They were in fear of death. I can't comment, obviously, on how valid that fear may or may not have been at the time, but she was in fear of death. She is alive. She doesn't want to complain. But because there may have been a side effect, obviously a non-fatal side effect, as a result of your treatment of her, maybe, this complaint was lodged. Would that have been enough, do you think, to get the suspension? What's the relationship here with the John Smith second complaint, same day? It smells of a hit job. It smells of some kind of an attempt to give a pretext to take your licence down.
Yes, so there's no doubt about that. The aim, to me, my impression is the aim has always been to cancel my registration. Now, the legislation 139E states that in order to cancel someone's registration, you have to have at least 2 complaints that's being investigated.
Two on the same day.
So,
sorry,
yeah.
It's incredibly serious. It's not funny, but it is kind of hilarious. 2 complaints on the same day, one of them named John Smith, uncontactable, unverifiable. Now, I want to come to this John Smith story because there were a few things that you said that caught my eye. So this was a script for ivermectin. It was a real script. It wasn't a fabrication. It was one that you did make out, but you did not make it out to John Smith. Is that correct?
No. John Smith claimed that the person that had the script was his friend.
And claimed that he was doing it on their behalf. Like, aren't there rules around medicines and claiming other people's medicines, etc.? Well, yes, but he sort of give the impression that he is really friendly with this member of my family. So it happens to be my brother who's sort of mentally disabled, and he doesn't have any friend called John Smith. In fact, our only the family members are looking after him. Right. So the story itself is implausible. How is this being handled? Who handles these sorts of cases? You're obviously pushing back and saying, no, this isn't right. I'm not being suspended on the right grounds. Is this in the courts, or is this actually being handled through some sort of an internal complaints process? Well, apparently they refuse to listen to what I have to say regarding the circumstances around the complaint. My lawyer have written to them that this looks like a falsified complaint, and sure they've does. Just ignored. Right. So what's the escalation here? What's the road ahead for you? Are you going to have to get on the front foot and start dragging them into court with all the costs and everything associated with that? How is this fight likely to unfold? Well, I have gone through quite a sort of a series of legal processes, but at the moment, I've got a Court of Appeal hearing that's coming up. So, and this hearing is one that I've taken the medical counsel to court on a judicial review challenging 2 issues. One was a legislation that states that the medical council and the HCCC have the duty and the responsibility to refer me to the tribunal if my complaint was significant. And it is significant because they've suspended me. So this legislation states that at the moment when they considered that my case was significant, that the referral had to take place. Now, it hasn't taken place until just 2 weeks ago because in order to try to make my Court of Appeal hearing have less utility, the HCCC have decided to refer me. And that's the legislation that I've challenged in the Court of Appeal. And then my second Court of Appeal challenge is a delegation of power. So the panel that suspended me has to have power delegated to them from the executive officer, because ordinarily the medical council do not have the power to suspend. Right. So it's only under the case of an emergency, which is what they've suspended all doctors on, that we are a danger to the public, and they have to exercise this emergency power to stop us from practicing. And that's just a whole heaps of lies, because all we're doing is I can only speak for myself, but I'm doing everything possible to save a life that's in front of me. And I have done that successfully. Had that patient had gone to the hospital, I believe that she would have died because the treatment would have been intubation
and remdesivir, which is almost a certain death as an outcome. So I'm not a danger to the public. I resent the accusation that I'm a danger to the public. So that's an abuse of legislation. That is abuse of power to claim that I'm a danger to the public. And my second complaint, in my opinion, is falsified. Whoever it is at John Smith, I don't know who it is, but I think that the health regulators know, because all they need to do is to find out the IP address of John Smith, and that will get to the bottom of who John Smith is. But they refuse to entertain this. They refuse to answer to my questions. I have reported this to police, and so far I haven't had any response, or I haven't heard anything from the police. So I'm doing the best that I can, and this is, to me, it's a witch hunt.
It certainly seems that way, and there's a lot of layers to this, and one of the things that strikes me is they're not just persecuting you, and I tend to agree it has at the very least the appearance of having been a hit job and the appearance of that second complaint being fake, pending other evidence to show that person really is legitimate. It has the appearance of a hit job, and they're not just persecuting you, but they've deprived your patients of their doctor for 25 years in some cases, no doubt. And they've deprived Australia of a highly qualified and very successful medical practitioner, multiple decades in the business without any complaints whatsoever. And this is happening now, of course, to multiple different doctors, all with different pretexts and different stories. So this is a very, very serious situation. The abusive process, the abuse of this bureaucratic power is very, very concerning. Suspended Dr My Le Trinh, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire. We are going to keep up to date with your story as it progresses. I wish you the very best in your fight. And if there's anything we can ever do for you, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for joining us on the Aussie Wire.
Could I quickly just add one thing?
Please do.
I'm waiting for the tribunal to release my judgment of the delegation of power. And my hearing in the Court of Appeal cannot proceed until the tribunal releases a judgment.
Right.
Now, it's been adjourned 3 times. It's been 15 weeks this Friday or tomorrow, and the tribunal have not released the judgment. And we have to adjourn the hearing again on Monday.
So they're just turning the process into the punishment. They're just dragging that out to make it as expensive and as painful for you as they possibly can.
Was it a little bit more than that, because my Court of Appeal hearing has a lot of significance, because by challenging the referral from the by challenging the referral to the tribunal, and when I win this argument, this legislation in the Court of Appeal, it will be the end of indefinite suspension of all practitioners in the state of New South Wales.
Wow. Okay, so you're swinging for the fences here. This is a precedent that could really have a big impact, at least within the state of New South Wales. Well, My Le Trinh, I wish you all the very best, and we will stay up to date with this story as it progresses.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Aussie Wire News. We release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. You can catch up on all of the past episodes by going to theaussiewire.com. And while you're there, make sure you join our email list so that we can keep in touch with you, even if we get cancelled by Big Tech. In the meantime, before we've been cancelled by Big Tech, make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms via @TheAussieWire. And if you enjoy what we do, please consider becoming an insider. Insiders are financial supporters, and in return for your financial support, you'll get exclusive content, you'll get giveaways, you'll get discounts, and our wonderful insiders community. The link to be able to do that is in the description of this video. Thank you once again for watching. I'm Topher Field, and this is the Aussie Wire.